The first time it happened, Malcolm Carter thought it was a mistake. He had worked his entire life for this, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Atlanta, complete with a pristine infinity pool that overlooked rolling green hills. At 46, he was a self-made man, a former college football star turned successful entrepreneur in the world of real estate. He had fought for every bit of success, carving a path where none had been laid for him. Born in a rough neighborhood in Detroit, Malcolm had risen above every statistic, every expectation, to become one of the most respected developers in the city. His home, a symbol of everything he had achieved, was supposed to be his sanctuary. And yet, on a blistering July afternoon, as he stepped onto his patio, he found a stranger floating in his pool like she owned the place. The woman, blonde, middle-aged, and dressed in an expensive designer swimsuit, lounged on a float, sunglasses perched on her nose, sipping what looked like a margarita. Her audacity stunned him. For a moment, Malcolm thought maybe she was a friend of his fiancée, Sierra, or one of the guests from the neighborhood's last social event. But as he stepped closer, recognition dawned. Evelyn Whitmore, his neighbor. They had never exchanged more than a nod in passing. She had never welcomed him when he moved in, never attended any of the neighborhood gatherings at his home. In fact, the few times their paths had crossed, she barely acknowledged his existence. Yet here she was, making herself comfortable in his pool. Malcolm cleared his throat. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I think you're in the wrong place." Evelyn barely moved. She adjusted her sunglasses, lazily turning her head in his direction as if he were the one intruding. "Oh, relax," she drawled, waving a dismissive hand. "It's just a pool. No need to be so uptight about it." His jaw tightened. Uptight? He had spent millions on this property, not to mention the years of sweat and sacrifice that got him here. And this woman had the nerve to act like his space was community property. "This is private property," he said, keeping his voice even. "You can't just walk into my backyard and use my pool." Evelyn finally sat up, rolling her eyes like he was making a scene over nothing. "Oh, come on, Malcolm, we're neighbors. It's just water. Why should it matter? Why should it matter?" Malcolm clenched his fists, a slow burn creeping up his spine. He had spent his whole life proving he belonged, in boardrooms, in high-end real estate circles, in spaces people like Evelyn thought were meant only for them. And now, she had the audacity to act as if his success, his ownership, was a mere technicality. It wasn't just about a pool. It was about who she thought had the right to luxury. And, more importantly, who didn't. Malcolm took a slow breath. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Malcolm Carter had always known people like Evelyn Whitmore existed, but knowing was different from experiencing. Over the next few weeks, his backyard, his sanctuary, became a battleground. The day after their first encounter, Malcolm reinforced the gate with a high-end lock and installed a state-of-the-art security system. He thought that would be enough to send a message. But Evelyn was undeterred. The following Saturday, just as Malcolm was settling into his lounge chair with a glass of bourbon, he heard laughter, women's laughter. At first, he thought Sierra had invited friends over. But as he turned toward the pool, his stomach dropped. Evelyn was there again. And this time, she had company. Two other women, about her age, were stretched out on his lounge chairs, sipping wine from his outdoor bar like it was theirs. Evelyn was back on her float, a smug smile curling her lips as if daring him to challenge her. Malcolm felt his pulse hammer in his ears. His first instinct was to throw them all out. But he knew how this worked. He had spent his entire life managing his tone, his expressions, his anger. One wrong move, and he would be the aggressor. He would be the threat. He exhaled, forced himself to remain calm. "Evelyn, I don't know what you think this is, but this isn't a community pool. I don't want to call the cops. But you are trespassing." She finally looked at him. But there was no fear, no shame, just arrogance. "Oh, Malcolm," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You don't have to be so dramatic. We're just enjoying the sun. It's not like you use this place all the time." His fists clenched at his sides. She saw this house, this life, as something she had more right to than him. Malcolm had done his research after their first encounter. Evelyn Whitmore came from old money, the kind that never questioned its privilege. Her father had been a real estate mogul, notorious for refusing to sell to black families in the 1970s. Her family had owned people like Malcolm's ancestors. And though times had changed, the mindset hadn't. Evelyn had never had to earn anything. She had inherited her wealth, her social status, her connections. Everything she had was handed to her. And yet, here she was, acting like he was the intruder. Like his success was unnatural. An error she had the right to correct. "You don't belong here," she had muttered under her breath once, when she thought he wasn't listening. And that was the root of it, wasn't it? She didn't just want his pool. She wanted to remind him of where she thought he should be. That night, as Malcolm locked up his property and reviewed the security footage, he realized something. Evelyn wasn't going to stop. She had never been told no in her life. And if she couldn't have what she wanted, she was going to make sure he didn't enjoy it either. Malcolm had faced obstacles before. He had built himself from nothing. He wasn't going to let Evelyn Whitmore take that from him. But the war had just begun. Malcolm had a feeling there was more to Evelyn Whitmore than just entitlement. But he never expected what he was about to uncover. That night, after yet another confrontation where Evelyn had sneered at him over the fence, muttering something about people like you not knowing how to share, Malcolm decided he'd had enough. He wasn't just going to fight her in the present, he was going to understand who she really was. Malcolm had built his success on strategy. In real estate, knowing the history of a property was just as important as knowing its value. He applied that same mindset now. Sitting at his desk, his laptop glowing in the dim light of his office, he started with the basics: public records, local archives, and ancestry databases. At first, he found the standard rich white family paper trail, real estate empires, business investments, country club memberships. But then, something deeper surfaced, a name he recognized: Nathaniel Whitmore. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as a wave of unease rolled through him. That name wasn't just familiar. It was infamous. Digging further, Malcolm's stomach tightened. No way. Evelyn's grandfather, Nathaniel Whitmore Sr., hadn't just been wealthy. He had been one of the most powerful figures in the Ku Klux Klan during its resurgence in the 1950s. There were photographs, grainy, black and white images of him standing beside burning crosses, his hood lowered just enough to show his cold, smiling face. Articles detailed his involvement in funding hate groups, running politicians who fought desegregation, and even orchestrating attacks against black communities in the South. Malcolm's breath came slow and heavy. This wasn't just about a pool. This was generational. And it got worse. Nathaniel's son, Evelyn's father, Richard Whitmore, had carried on the family's hateful legacy in more subtle ways. While he had distanced himself from the overt violence of his father's era, he funneled his wealth into discriminatory housing policies, ensuring that black families found it nearly impossible to buy homes in high-end neighborhoods. He had been sued, multiple times, for redlining practices, using his influence to deny mortgages and devalue black-owned properties. And then there was Evelyn. Unlike her father and grandfather, she hadn't needed to orchestrate hate from behind closed doors. She lived her privilege openly, never facing consequences, never being told no. She hadn't been raised to burn black neighborhoods, but she had been raised to believe that people like Malcolm didn't belong. That his success was an affront to the world her family had built. Malcolm leaned back, running a hand over his face. This wasn't just some privileged woman throwing a tantrum. This was history repeating itself. He exhaled, his mind already turning over the possibilities. He could sit on this information, keep his head down, and hope Evelyn got bored of harassing him. Or he could expose her. What do you think? Should Malcolm take the high road, or should he make sure the world knows exactly who Evelyn Whitmore really is? Stay tuned. The real storm is just beginning. Malcolm knew he had two choices: let Evelyn walk away without consequences, or make sure she never escaped her past. He chose the latter. The morning after uncovering the Whitmore family's dark legacy, Malcolm made a call, not to the police, but to someone with more power in the modern age: the press. A well-connected journalist, Lisa Monroe, had built a reputation for exposing hidden racism and corruption. She didn't just write stories, she burned careers to the ground. And when Malcolm laid out everything he had found, Evelyn's harassment, her false accusations, the security footage of her breaking into his property, and her family's deep-rooted ties to the KKK, Lisa didn't just agree to write the story. She promised it would go viral. 2 days later, The article dropped. Old money. Old hatred. The Whitmore legacy of racism and entitlement. The exposé didn't hold back. It laid out every grim detail. Nathaniel Whitmore Sr.'s Klan leadership, Richard Whitmore's redlining schemes, and Evelyn's blatant trespassing and attempts to weaponize the police against Malcolm. There were pictures of Evelyn, her family, their old estates, and her grandfather standing in front of a burning cross. By noon, the article had exploded across social media. By evening, news outlets were picking it up. And by the next morning, Evelyn Whitmore was the most hated woman in America. She had no idea what hit her. Malcolm was sipping his coffee on his front porch when he saw her storming across the lawn. Her face red, phone clutched in a shaking hand. She didn't look like the composed, wealthy socialite anymore. She looked unhinged. "You ruined me," she shrieked, shoving her phone in his face. "Do you see this? My name is trending. People are sending me death threats." Malcolm took a slow sip of his coffee. "Sounds like a you problem." Evelyn's whole body trembled with rage. "You don't understand. My business partners are pulling out. The board is voting me out. My friends won't even return my calls." She pointed a manicured finger at him, her voice cracking. "You think you won? You think this is funny?" Malcolm finally set his mug down. "Evelyn, for weeks, you treated me like I was beneath you. You acted like my property. My success was a mistake you needed to correct. Now the world sees you for who you really are. You did this to yourself." And then came the plot twist. Evelyn's phone rang, and she paled as she answered. "What? No. She swallowed, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "You can't do this." The voice on the other end was loud enough for Malcolm to hear. "Due to the overwhelming backlash, your accounts have been frozen pending review. Your assets are under investigation." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "Trouble in paradise?" Evelyn's knees buckled. Her money, her family's money, was in danger. And without it, she was nothing. But the real storm was still coming. Want to see what happens next? Like the channel and stay tuned, because Evelyn Whitmore's fall isn't over yet. Evelyn Whitmore had spent her entire life believing rules didn't apply to her. But in a cold, gray courtroom, reality finally caught up. Malcolm sat in the front row, arms crossed, watching as the woman who had tormented him for weeks was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. Evelyn looked nothing like the composed socialite she had once been. Her hair was disheveled, her face blotchy from sleepless nights, and her designer suit, one that had likely cost more than some people's rent, now hung off her frame like it didn't belong to her. The courtroom was packed. Journalists whispered in the back rows, cameras flashing every few seconds. The fallout from the exposé had been swift. Evelyn had lost her business, her board seat, and her reputation. But her biggest mistake had come after that. 2 nights ago, in a fit of desperation, she had stormed onto Malcolm's property. Again, screaming and pounding on his front door. When security cameras caught her making threats, violent, racist threats, Malcolm had called the police. But Evelyn had escalated things further. She had lunged at Malcolm. That was the last line she would ever cross. Now, in the harsh light of the courtroom, Evelyn was facing real consequences for the first time in her life. The bailiff called the room to order, and the judge entered, a tall, composed black man with piercing eyes. Judge Samuel Brooks commanded immediate silence as he took his seat. Evelyn stiffened, her hands clenching the table in front of her. Malcolm recognized that look. It was the same one she had given him when she first trespassed in his pool. The disbelief that someone like him held power over her. "Ms. Whitmore," Judge Brooks began, flipping through the case files. "You are charged with trespassing, harassment, making false police reports, and attempted assault. How do you plead?" Evelyn's lawyer whispered something, but she barely seemed to hear him. Her lips trembled. "Not guilty." Malcolm nearly laughed. The prosecutor didn't waste time. Security footage was played for the jury, video after video of Evelyn breaking into Malcolm's yard, sneering at him, and, finally, her outburst outside his home where she screamed, "I'll make sure you regret ever moving here." The evidence was undeniable, but it was what happened next that sealed Evelyn's fate. As the prosecutor laid out her crimes, Judge Brooks frowned, setting his pen down. "Ms. Whitmore, do you have anything to say for yourself before sentencing?" That was when Evelyn snapped. "You people are all the same," she shouted, standing abruptly. "You think you can take our homes, our wealth, Our neighborhoods? Her voice cracked, hysteria taking over. This is a damn joke. He set me up. And you? She pointed a trembling finger at the judge. You shouldn't even be a judge. The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Brooks didn't react. He simply adjusted his glasses and picked up his gavel. Given your outburst and clear lack of remorse, he said coldly, I am extending your sentence beyond what was initially recommended. Evelyn's breath hitched. No, you can't. But the gavel struck. Sentencing will proceed immediately. Evelyn's face crumpled. Malcolm exhaled, watching the moment she finally realized there was no more escaping. No more money to buy her way out. No more power. Just consequences. What do you think? Did Evelyn get what she deserved? Comment below and stay tuned for what happens next, because her downfall isn't over yet. For the first time in weeks, Malcolm Carter could breathe. The war was over. Evelyn Whitmore, the woman who had trespassed on his property, harassed him, and tried to weaponize the police against him, was now sitting in a jail cell. Stripped of the wealth and privilege that had once shielded her from consequences. A year behind bars wasn't enough to undo the damage her family had inflicted on generations before him. But it was enough to send a message. Privilege had its limits, and justice had no expiration date. Malcolm stood on his back patio, staring out at the infinity pool that had started this whole mess. The water shimmered under the afternoon sun, peaceful and undisturbed. Mine, he thought, not just the pool, not just the house, but the peace that came with it. And this time, no one was going to take it away from him. The neighborhood, once wary, had shifted. His inbox overflowed with emails. Not from business partners, but from neighbors, some apologizing for not stepping in sooner. Others offering their support. A few even admitted they had never questioned Evelyn before. Had blindly accepted her charm, her power. But now, the truth was out. Justice had a way of changing people. The real surprise, though, came that weekend. It started small. A few neighbors showed up at his door, holding dishes of food and bottles of wine. We just wanted to say, we're with you. An older woman, Mrs. Jensen, said, offering a warm smile. Then more people arrived, folks he had only exchanged polite nods with in passing. Before he knew it, his backyard was full. It wasn't just a party. It was a statement. His neighbors, black, white, young, old, gathered by the pool, talking, laughing, bringing life back to a space that had once been tainted by entitlement. Someone had set up speakers. A smooth jazz playlist drifting through the air. Kids ran through the yard, their laughter cutting through the last remnants of tension that Evelyn had left behind. Sierra slid her arms around Malcolm's waist, resting her head on his shoulder. You did it, she murmured. We did, he corrected, glancing around at the people who had finally come together, not just to support him, but to stand against everything Evelyn had represented. His success, his place here, was no longer a question. It was a fact. And Evelyn? She was gone. Her name had become a punchline. Her legacy reduced to viral memes and cautionary tales. Reporters dug deeper into her past, unearthing more dirt. The same society that had once embraced her now shunned her. Malcolm didn't need revenge. Karma had done its job. To Malcolm, someone called, lifting a glass. The crowd followed. To new beginnings, Malcolm said, smiling as he clinked his glass with Sierra's. What do you think? Did Malcolm get the justice he deserved? Comment below and stay tuned, because this story isn't just about the past. It's about the future. In the end, justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about setting things right. As Malcolm Carter stood on his balcony, looking out at the peaceful view of his home, he felt something he hadn't in weeks, contentment. Not just because Evelyn Whitmore was finally facing the consequences of her actions, but because the battle was over. And he had won without sacrificing his integrity. Evelyn had once been untouchable, protected by wealth, privilege, and a society that had looked the other way for too long. But when her entitlement and hatred pushed her too far, when she tried to take what wasn't hers and silence a man she deemed less than, karma answered with a force she never saw coming. No amount of money could undo her downfall. No privilege could erase the headlines, the prison sentence, or the public shame she now carried. And that was the lesson, wasn't it? For too long, people like Evelyn had moved through life believing they were above consequences. But times had changed. Racism and entitlement were no longer things that could be whispered in private and forgotten. They had consequences, real, undeniable consequences. And Malcolm? He didn't just fight for himself. He fought for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. For every black man or woman who had been questioned for daring to succeed. For every person who had been falsely accused, overlooked, or forced to work twice as hard just to be seen as equal. His story was their story. And in the end, the message was clear. The world won't protect those who refuse to change. The people who think they can step on others, lie, cheat, and manipulate their way through life will always meet their reckoning. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but karma never forgets. Malcolm took a deep breath. The evening air crisp against his skin. His neighborhood was no longer a battlefield. His home, once a symbol of struggle, had become a place of unity. And that was the best victory of all. So if there's one thing to take from this story, let it be this: stand your ground. Never let anyone make you feel unworthy of your own success. Hold people accountable. The world only changes when we refuse to stay silent. Trust that karma always comes around. No matter how powerful someone thinks they are, they can't escape the weight of their own actions forever. Malcolm didn't have to destroy Evelyn. She destroyed herself. And that is what unchecked privilege does. It convinces people they can't fall. Until they do. What do you think? Have you ever seen karma in action like this? Let's talk about it in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. Because trust me, there are plenty more to come.